Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another episode of What's in a Performance, where today we are taking our first look at one of Halcyon's performances. And when I say performance, I mean performance, because we're going to be taking a look at one of his newer videos where he performed live in front of an audience, one of his own anime arrangements. Now, Halcyon has been a long-time supporter and friend of this channel, and so big ups to you, my guy. You're the best. Really appreciate you. And I hope if you're watching this video, which you might not be, because you probably already know everything that I'm about to say. But if you're watching this video, I hope you enjoy this. And with all that being said, let's get right to the review. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content and finding it helpful, I've made something else for you too that can help you improve at your piano playing. And that is a guide on how to practice. Too often we just think about the techniques and the things that we need to do and achieve and accomplish and learn, but we don't think quite enough about how to implement that into our practice to make it effective and something that's ingrained as an ability. And so go to the link in my description down below. And while you're down there, and if you need a little bit more help, do check out my private lessons as well. And let's get right back to the video. All right, we're all set up. Now we are reviewing Halcyon's performance of Ichiban no Takara Mono. And this is, again, live in Singapore. Why I chose a live performance is because I think live performances put you under a different sort of pressure than with recording. Recording sometimes is a little bit more polished because you can do multiple takes, but it lacks a little bit of life. Not saying that's true of any of Halcyon's videos because they're all fantastic. I'm saying that of my videos. This will be an interesting mix between reaction and review because I actually haven't watched this video yet. As you can already see, there's quite a sizable audience listening to my man play. So we'll see how Halcy handles the pressure, how he takes the heat. The UE, ED, insert ED. One thing that I say that I actually really enjoy already is the fact that it's not just... He has a little bit of direction to the way that he phrases, right? He goes, he starts low, builds, and then it drops, right, in the middle of the phrase. And so there's a little bit of interesting swelling already that makes it a little bit more nuanced than just a piano as it's written. I can't tell if it's the recording or the piano, but it sounds a little bit dry. Maybe it's the piano, so I don't want to comment on that too much because I do prefer a little bit more pedal, but I can hear it if he's going for a little bit less pedal because he wants to keep the melody clear. And I do like the way that's standing out, so. I always like these sorts of chords that break the key because it's always like a moment where you like kind of raise your eyebrows. I call them eyebrow raising moments. You know, I like the sort of emphasis that Halcy puts here. He leans into it a little bit. Yeah, it's like very soft, soothing, just constant left hand. Right, and there's a little bit of like extra edge to it. Like the way that these notes are ringing. I enjoy the fact, and I think this is something that beginner and intermediate students actually struggle a little bit with, which is the delineation, the separation between the two hands. Both hands don't have to be playing the same dynamic at the same time. Halcy is playing here with his left hand like very softly. Right, and it stays consistent throughout the entirety of the phrase. But with his right hand, he really works the dynamic range where he almost ranges from like a mezzo forte all the way up to like a forte at moments, back down to a mezzo piano. So it's like something that's like very interesting where like you can have a set dynamic, right? You can have a set dynamic range. We'll say like mezzo piano, for example. And if you keep your left hand there, or maybe even a little bit below, then the melody can sometimes be free to just roam the entirety of the dynamic range because it still has the undergirding of what the dynamic that you're looking for is. And so we go back a little, we can take a listen to this again. Right, you hear the melody keep coming up. Oh, I love the way the middle voice comes out. I might have kept it a little bit softer if I were playing this. Right, I would have kept maybe a tiny bit softer before I start unleashing it a little bit, but I feel, I'm picking up what he's putting down. I take notes. Oh, that key change gets me. I didn't like the anime. You can flame me in the comments down below. I'll defend myself in my Discord or on my Twitch stream. The link is in the description. But that key change still gets me. You see a little bit of weight being pushed into the keys. Especially with this A, right? Right. Every time Halsey comes back to the A, he pushes in a little bit so that it rings a little bit, because we're driving almost like each phrase is driving to the next A. Ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da. Right. And it comes up nicely at the end. What he's playing is a little bit different from his 2019 sheets, which is what I'm looking at right now. But one of the things that I like is sometimes people will play this very flat, right? When you have, or maybe even only the first one is articulate, or right. But Halsey nicely brings out the chord movement, right, with the. If I'm not mistaken, it's almost like even a little bit of down-up motion on the wrist here, which makes it a little bit more pleasant. Yeah, you can see his hand very slightly move. Right, so down, up, right? These so important across the entirety of playing the piano. So learn it, master it if you haven't already, and maybe I'll make a video on it. And it eases off a little bit at the end. I'd love to hear that. Ooh, another key change. I like the bringing out of this bottom note, right? So the top note in the left hand is being held all the way through, but the bottom note gives it a little bit of articulation and definition, right? And is separate enough from the right hand that it doesn't really muddy it all too much, so he's free to articulate slightly more. Same thing that we talked about earlier with the chords in the left hand being softer and the right hand now being able to be more expressive. Another eyebrow raise. I really love the way that he's leaning in a little bit. I've always found it pretty curious how he plays these. Because for a guy who whose hands are a little bit smaller than mine, he loves writing all these octaves into all his arrangements, and it's always very curious to me, because when I play octaves like this, I sometimes struggle to get like this sort of like bouncy sort of feeling or like texture on my tone. But the way Halcyon plays it is he lifts his wrist slightly like this, and it's almost like he's poking a little bit into the key to generate that octave, right, and that sort of bounce. And I would say that the takeaway from something like this, right, because I think this is just the way that he plays octaves, but it generates an interesting tone, right? And the takeaway is that the hand, right, the fingers need to maintain structure when they're going into the keys. Because if you're too loose, right, even if you hold your wrist a certain way, right, or like with a certain stiffness, then you disperse a lot of that force and energy along the key, and you don't get as sharp or as articulate of a tone with that sort of bounce. But because of the way that he's holding his wrist, and because at the end of the day, the tips of his fingers are strong and like holding that sort of structure, then he gets that sort of bounce. Right, it comes out very nicely. I personally don't play my octaves with my wrist this high, but maybe that's because I have bigger hands. So you have smaller hands too? Let me know down in the comments below how you tackle a lot of octaves in your playing or big chords. Already a little bit more weight putting into the keys. What I really like though is that this forte is louder than the previous one. And that tells me that he saved space. He left some room to grow. And part of it is the arrangement, right? Because now it's like a little bit more open. right, instead of being in the lower register, if I remember correctly. But now it's a little bit more expanded, right? Like he's using more of the keyboard. So it naturally rings a little bit more, but also he is physically playing louder and just leaning into the keys. And comes back down for the ending of the phrase. Well, that's really sensitive. Oh my gosh. I actually really like that decrescendo. Because it felt like it had like so much tension in it when he was coming back down. I know, again, like since this is my first time watching this video, typically what I'll do is like sit through it and watch it all the way through. But since I'm reacting and commenting and reviewing and letting you know what he's doing and hopefully teaching you a thing or two about how he's playing, we're going to go back and listen to it again. Alright. Remember what he did previously. It goes up higher, right? And then instead of coming back up again, it's like each tier, each level moves down slightly by some increment. He ends at a slightly lower spot every single time. And it just creates all this like tension. Especially that one, right? I expect a little bit more ringing, I expect a little bit more articulation, but it's like he's pulling something back, right? It's like he's holding something back so that it gets a little bit of tension and it creates very natural diminuendo for the rest of the phrase, which I really, really enjoy. So let's listen to it one more time. And so this is, I think, partially one of the reasons why if you're learning classical music as well, it's applicable even to anime piano or like more modern playing, because it's almost like he's terracing each phrase as though he were playing Bach, right? Like this phrase is now at like a forte, a slightly less than forte, and then mezzo forte, slightly less than mezzo forte. It walks its way down, and it creates an interesting decrescendo effect. That middle voice. It's not in the 2019 sheet, so I have no idea what he's doing. A nice drop out of the left hand, right? So it's just a right hand now. I feel like I hear some compression artifacts on the mics, so I can only assume that this is even louder than the last one. Look at my man ball out. You can really feel the force going into the piano. There's a lot of power. What I like about the arrangement here, though, is that you notice one of the things that Halsey does throughout the entirety of the piece to kind of mix up the feeling a little bit is he expands how much of the keyboard that he's using. So first he starts off a little bit more compressed, then the chorus opens up a little bit more, and then it comes back together a little bit more, and the chorus opens up a little bit wider, and then with this final chorus or this final key change, it gets very, very wide. He's making bigger jumps. He's using the lower registers a lot more, and that just continually expands the energy or the feeling of the piece. One of the ways that I want to think about, or I want you to start thinking about dynamics, is not about just loudness or like softness or how quiet something is, but rather how energetic it feels. If it feels very, very energetic, very hyper, very strong, right, which is what the Italian word means, forte means strong. If it feels strong, very energetic, well, you can affect that in a whole variety of ways. Maybe the tempo is increasing, or maybe if it's a spot with a lot of tension, the tempo decreases. It's very contextual and is very variable. And one of the ways that you can do that in an arrangement is by expanding how much of the keyboard that you're using. The wider the range of the keyboard, a lot of the times means the more energy the arrangement inherently feels like it has. And so if you want to get a fortissimo or even louder than a fortissimo, then maybe expand what you're doing on the keyboard before you just think, I'm going to play louder. So strong, powerful. And now as it's dying down, right, you notice that he's not using as much of the keyboard anymore. Now he's leaning forward. He's pushing it a little bit less with the diminuendo. Ooh, quick drop. Did he adjust his glasses because he was crying? Guess we'll never know. Guess we'll never know. You know, I'm running through my head how many ways you can like vary this sort of motif. I will say the one thing that I think maybe could have helped a tiny bit. I couldn't really tell if he did it, so maybe he did. But maybe one of the iterations towards the end, maybe a tiny bit of left pedal, or maybe even shifting it an octave higher just for one little degree more of variation. But otherwise, I'm clapping with the rest of it. I'm clapping with the rest of it. There's my man Halsey. My man Halsey don't play. He puts in work. He writes fantastic arrangements. Puts up videos on the regular, unlike me. And he plays and performs well. Do go check out his channel if you haven't seen it already. Especially if you like listening to a lot of anime OPs and EDs, because he more than likely has the one that you're thinking of on there somewhere. And if you enjoyed this video, consider joining my Discord where you can chat with me and other people in my community about more piano and anime related things. And if you really enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments below if I should review more of Halcyon's stuff and what I should review. But until then, here's some videos that I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy. Until next time, everybody, peace.